Yes, good morning, and thank you so much for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to say a few words and then present some slides on our thinking together. Firstly, to say thank you so much to your ministry for taking a lead on this important topic. And I don't forget here the fact that when we were first working together with South Asia, it was a meeting in September 2017, and this was as done already under the leadership of Pakistan through its lead of the South Asian Cooperative Environment Programme under Dr. Mohammed Khurshid. And that was really critical for taking us forward already at that stage. And since then, of course, Pakistan has already co-sponsored the second resolution on sustainable nitrogen management, and of course a partner also on the Colombo Declaration. So the work of Pakistan on this, I think, is already clearly recognized as we go forward. I very much also appreciate the comments of the opening speaker on the need to change and update and tune the resolution text in order to meet the needs of Pakistan and make sure that those opportunities are found. The first text that we have been working on together is really to identify some of the things which naturally follow on from the first two resolutions, but of course, by definition, the space is there to make sure that it really meets your needs. And in terms of meeting those needs, to say that this is part of this partnership with South Asia as a group of countries. And I'm going to say that a bit more now in the slides as I go forward. So as I talk, I'm going to present you a few slides now to talk about the why nitrogen issue, make it visual, and to say also about the South Asia Nitrogen Hub. So I'm going to share screen, and all being well, this works. And can you see the screen?
Yes, Mark, we can see.
Is it full screen or not full screen?
Still, it's not full screen.
Okay, try again. Okay, that should now be full screen.
Yes.
Very good. So thank you, everybody, and it's a pleasure to speak to you. So why is a UNEA resolution needed at UNEA 6? Firstly, just to emphasize the nitrogen problem and the nature of it. And I have to say, I was originally an ammonia researcher, only one nitrogen compound, and gradually through our cooperation, we've been joining forces to realize that we need to consider the entire nitrogen cycle. In our work on the European nitrogen assessment, we started with 21 reasons to worry about nitrogen, found out that 21 was too many to talk about. We boiled it down to 9 and boiled it further and finally got down to 5 major reasons. And you get an acronym there: water quality, air quality, greenhouse balance, ecosystems, soils quality, the wages of too much nitrogen. All the problems we know already, nitrogen is a part of them. And of course, that means part of the solution. Really up to date, I'm going to show you a few threats. And this is photographs from the last 2 or 3 weeks. The top left picture is the largest lake in the United Kingdom. It's called Loch Ness. It's in Northern Ireland. It's suffering from major algal bloom at present with toxic blue-green algae. They're killing animals. So if a dog swims into the lake, it dies. There's a picture here of a swan dying. Wildlife is dying. The fish are under threat. In terms of the top right picture, this is really thick algae. And this is an extreme case, but it's demonstrating the effects of nitrogen and, in this case, phosphorus on water bodies. But nitrogen is not just a water problem. This is also Northern Ireland. These are my own photographs. The left-hand side is a tree with biodiversity, lots of lichens and bryophytes, insects associated. The right-hand picture of algae growing down a similar tree near a farm where ammonia, air pollution, is killing off the biodiversity, saturating it. Another example, again, this is me holding a couple of samples. The left is a healthy sphagnum moss. The right is decomposed as a result of nitrogen air pollution. Essentially, that's destroying the biodiversity, but also removing the potential for this bog to absorb carbon and acting as a carbon sink. Nitrogen is also becoming a political issue, particularly in the Netherlands. These farmers are actually out there demonstrating against the nitrogen policies of the Netherlands. Now, you have to take nitrogen in the Netherlands as a special case. They've had 30 years plus of really active policies. They reduced their emissions already by 50%. They're now looking to reduce by 50% again. The farmers say you've gone too many measures, but essentially the environmental limits have been exceeded and legally the government has to take action. Now, this is farmers complaining, but in many cases, and I take the note of the first speaker, this is actually an opportunity for farmers because, of course, nitrogen is a key resource. And if done well, wasting less of that key resource is going to contribute to the positive economies of farmers. Of course, let's not forget climate change. And I understand from Tariq that you've had heavy rain today, and we know that climate change is associated with terrible climate extremes, global warming. And we should not forget that a part of that story is the nitrous oxide contributing to that warming together with methane and carbon dioxide. And that if we want to address the climate change problem, we need to address nitrogen as part of that. What is clear is that nitrogen is not the main element of the warming, but it's part of it. But if we want to address nitrous oxide, we need to address the full nitrogen cycle. Now, let's just look at that nitrogen cycle. And this framed it as a cascade here, because we put in reactive nitrogen compounds from the N2 in the atmosphere through high temperature combustion, making nitrogen oxides and nitrous oxide, fertilizer manufacture. And as it goes through the food system, it's also leaking out into the atmosphere in all these different nitrogen forms. You can see the nitrogen oxides and ammonia reacting to form particulate matter and ammonium in rain. As ecosystems saturate, they start liberating more reactive nitrogen to the environment, lost in the waters until it's ultimately denitrified back to atmospheric nitrogen. And these are all the problems associated with it, a list of 9 in this occasion. There's also new risks out there because as we look in society to decarbonize the economy, there's opportunities for a hydrogen economy, but how to transfer the hydrogen. And ammonia is being seen as one of these. So a way to store hydrogen and move it around in nitrogen compounds. There's a great opportunity for decarbonization, but also big risks in terms of increasing ammonia and indeed nitrous oxide N2O pollution, and indeed impact potentially on nitrogen prices globally. And this is a big change coming ahead that needs further assessment. Now, when it comes to policies on nitrogen, because nitrogen is so diverse, it plays a role in lots of different intergovernmental processes. This is a diagram from 2016, so now rather old, but it shows how long we have been working and thinking about this challenge. And essentially, at UNIA 3 in the wings, we came up with the idea that these shouldn't only be alone, but we need communication, cooperation, and that we need to address the fragmentation of nitrogen. So how to get them talking together, and the framing was some kind of nitrogen coordination mechanism to get them talking and working together. So moving forward on that, with the first resolution in 2019, it was agreed to start considering the options of how to address these interactions. It's worth looking carefully at this paragraph because the first part is considering the case to establish an intergovernmental nitrogen coordination mechanism, and that's really been at the heart of the discussions for the last 5 years. Also worthwhile noting the end of that sentence and consider the case for developing an integrated nitrogen policy. And that integrated nitrogen policy, I think, has not had any attention in the last 5 years. So in your discussions, you might want to revisit the case of that. Particularly, actually, I recall that sentence was originally added in Mali by a Pakistan colleague who was at that point director of the National Fertilizer Institute. Now, in terms of options, if I had outlined that there are 4 major options. The first is the status quo. It's fragmentation between existing bodies, a limited communication, and clearly we know that that is not optimal. Often one will see incoherencies between those, and we're missing the gravity of shared action. The second option is that one of those conventions leads on nitrogen. The problem with that option is that you hit the limits of mandate. The Climate Convention can't talk about biodiversity. The Biodiversity Convention won't focus on climate. The Air Convention won't deal with the others. So you hit a limit of scope. Option 3 is a new nitrogen convention, and a few people have suggested this, but on the whole, the reactions over the last 5 years have been, no, we don't want that. We have enough conventions. They're big processes. Let's not do that, but rather work with existing. And that work with existing was also in the framing of the call from the UNEA 4 resolution. So that takes us then to this 4th option, an intergovernmental nitrogen coordination mechanism, the working together between the conventions, between the member states on nitrogen. And I think it's clear that the question at this point is not whether option 4 is the right answer. It seems option 4 is the right answer, but rather how should option 4 look in detail when actually this is mapped out in practice. Now, just to look at that, one can visualize that in lots of different ways. Here's a visualization from UNEP, which in this visualization emphasizes the role of the different UN conventions. You don't see member states in that, but member states need to be a key part of this. There's no member state process on this. And Joyce Masuya, former deputy director of UNEP, emphasizing the economic value of the wasted nitrogen resource. This was, of course, at 2019 prices, and since then the prices, as you know, went even higher. Now, coming on to the second resolution from last year, February 2022. This, as many of you may know, started a discussion as well about ambition to reduce nitrogen waste by 2030. It was originally put in to halve nitrogen waste, consistent with the Colombo Declaration, but the member states did not agree on it at that point. However, you may recall that in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework has been agreed since then, an ambition to halve, or at least halve, nutrient pollution, including nitrogen, by 2030. So that's been taken further forward there. I want to draw your attention to these lines that also might it look in practice. And just to say that in supporting that process, a colleague of mine, we've supported through the International Nitrogen Management System, an environmental lawyer, Claire Hamilton, who's recently produced a document on modalities, which we'll be happy to share. So let's just look at key needs for a resolution at UNEA 6. The first is, we've had 5 years of discussion about this coordination on nitrogen, and UNEA 6 is the time to decide the way forward. Both those resolutions report back to UNEA 6. So what is the way forward? That must be decided at UNEA 6. And we're suggesting that some form of option 4 to promote cooperation across conventions and governments for an intergovernmental coordination mechanism, something that is light touch, effective, but getting the countries working together. And we see a prototype of that already in the nitrogen working group that has been established by UNEP, which now already has 70 member states associated with it. The next challenge must be, of course, to accelerate work on the national action plans. And I think there's a key question there about harmonizing for mutual benefit. I suspect the countries don't want anything too burdensome, but some degree of comparability will clearly help. And it needs to be worked out how much harmonizing and how to move forward. The third priority I would list is mobilizing investment through what we call nitro finance. What do we mean by nitro finance? We mean that we're wasting these billions of dollars of nitrogen per year to air pollution, water pollution, denitrification. If we were to waste less of that, more could go into the farming system, contributing to farmer productivity. But to get there, investment is needed. Often a farmer will say, well, yes, it's all very well, but what about this piece of equipment? How would I achieve that recovery? An investment is needed. So we're talking about this as a new form of green finance. Nitro finance is a key opportunity. And not only that, it's an opportunity with major rewards. The fourth area, which I've alluded to in this earlier slide, is this emerging risk of ammonia as a green fuel. Now, green in principle, because it's instead of burning carbon and making carbon dioxide, one burns ammonia and makes pure N2 plus water. All fine, except there are risks, and the risks are that this is going to triple global nitrogen flows, potentially. This is projections I'll show in a minute. But also that increases risks of ammonia pollution, nitrous oxide pollution, and nitrogen oxides pollution. And finally, the third risk there is it may if so much of this is made, it may affect nitrogen prices, pushing nitrogen prices up higher, making it harder for farmers, and of course, at the same time, providing an even bigger driver for sustainable nitrogen management. In the next few slides, I'm going to tell you just something about the South Asian Nitrogen Hub briefly. The South Asian Nitrogen Hub is providing a support process. It's funded by UK Research and Innovation, and it involves all 8 countries of South Asia. As you can see from the image there, it's interdisciplinary, going from business, government, village engagement, with a whole range of different dimensions of addressing this nitrogen cycle, how to produce more food and energy with less pollution and a more efficient system. It includes agronomic experiments, genetic experiments, work on the village scale. You can see here on the top left a couple of the village studies that our colleagues at Faisalabad Agricultural University are working on in the village scale. Is looking towards solutions. And here's just some of the solutions which has been identified by the village scale work package. And many of them will seem familiar, but it's a question of bringing those together. It involves awareness raising, building the conversation around nitrogen, that nitrogen is something that the world needs to know about, whether it's in agriculture or in biodiversity. On the bottom right is actually students analyzing, identifying forest lichens, which are very sensitive to ammonia and nitrogen pollution. Of course, producing also inputs into the policy process, and here the South Asia Policy Report prepared by the Hub. We have other documents internationally, and one of the other processes we're contributing to is the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, which is North America, Europe, Caucasus, Central Asia. And in this document, the integrated guidance document, we have something like 76 different measures, and you can see several of them there I've identified how they're good for different forms of nitrogen. I think this is an ambition for the future, that we'd like to see such a document produced fresh for different regions, including for South and East Asia. And in that, of course, according to different regions, the priorities and measures may be varying. We've contributed to training, and I'm very happy to welcome the input of Tariq Aziz into this process of the nitrogen MOOCs, and to see the launch of the Urdu, a massive online open course with, this is entry level to learn about the nitrogen challenge, and widely available in those different languages now as a result of the hub's support. And of course, ultimately, we're looking to upscale the nitrogen flows and fluxes from the South Asia region, looking at all the different nitrogen flows and looking at scenarios. And to say that we have the upcoming South Asian Nitrogen Hub meeting on the 2nd to 6th of October in the University of Peradeniya in Sri Lanka. And that also is concurrent with the Asia Pacific meeting going towards UNEA, which we'll probably talk about further since we are planning a side event for that Asia Pacific meeting. So let's summarize then why written resolution at UNEA 6. The cost is the first issue, and the nitrogen cost is really been a big issue the last years. You can see this is a really ancient curve going from the high price of nitrogen thousands of years ago. This was in Central Asia. With Industrial Revolution, the costs became cheaper. We've lived through the last years of, I would say, unsustainably cheap nitrogen, meaning that a large amount is wasted and farmers are not getting the best use of it. But we face risks in the future with the prices increasing. Now, just to say what that looked like in 2022, I'm going to compare agricultural subsidies on several scales with the nitrogen waste. So in the UK, we were wasting about 3.5 billion worth of nitrogen, but our farm support payments total for everything are about 3 billion. So even bigger than the value of the farm support was the value of the wasted nitrogen. That actually works out similarly at the EU level, that the total price of the European Common Agricultural Policy, 55 billion, 60 billion wasted, and much harder to do on a world scale, but something that's comparable. I'm not sure what the numbers would be for Pakistan, but I think the point is clear that this is a huge waste of resource, that if we waste less, it's great for farmers, great for everybody. And to get there, we need the nitrogen finance. That nitrogen finance needs framing in a resolution. The next risk, as I've mentioned, is this risk of nitrogen flows for burning ammonia as a fuel. This is a 1.5-degree scenario for the International Renewable Energy Agency, looking to see that global ammonia production may triple by 2050. And if you look on the bottom right, actually what you find out is that whereas in the past, fertilizer has been the dominant source of nitrogen flows, into the future, ammonia energy could be even bigger than fertilizer. So major risks that need to be addressed. So here we are, almost to finish. These priorities as I see them, but the whole point of this conversation is that you will have priorities as well. So add your priorities in and let's talk about them. The first is that we've had 5 years now of talking about the options for intergovernmental nitrogen coordination. UNEA 6 needs to be the finding that way forward, and we're suggesting that option 4, something around a coordination mechanism, is the way forward. We need to harmonize and accelerate work on the national action plans and agree to do that. Need to agree a statement about how to work towards mobilizing investment. How ambitious that is, of course, that is another question, but certainly the framing needs to be there about this as an opportunity. And we need to agree to address the emerging risks from an environmental perspective associated with green ammonia. Now, a last slide, and whether this is good or helpful for you or bad, let's see. But let's imagine a nitrogen coordination mechanism. At the heart is, of course, member states. I framed it here under the United Nations Environment Programme. It could be different, but this is our focus so far. We have science support through the International Nitrogen Management System. There's a whole range of different conventions and programs relevant for nitrogen. You can just read them as you go around. How many of those to bring in at one time? That's the question. It could be that a practical approach is to move stepwise, working with the main bodies first, getting those, sharing their information together with the member states. Key inputs, leadership by champions, national focal points, national action plans, national nitrogen budgets are a key area to help. Key themes, information sharing, coherency, halving nitrogen waste, mitigation options. And indeed, In the same time, there's also opportunity for multi-actor engagement, where UNEP already has a couple of processes which would be strengthened by such an approach going forward: the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, the Global Wastewater Initiative. At the moment, those aren't as strong as they could be. By establishing this process that's getting the member states working more strongly together, I think we would see increased feedback to strengthen also the multi-actor partnerships. So with that, I'll stop sharing and look forward to the discussion as it goes forward today.